Alrighty, well, thank you. I'm Andrew Allman with Ohio Agribusiness Association, and I also serve as the Executive Director for the Nutrient Stewardship Council, and that's the governing body for our Nutrient Stewardship Certification Program here in the Western Lake Erie Basin in Ohio. OABA is the program administrator for the certification program here. So just wanted to share this timeline that you'll see on the screen. This is for the Western Lake Erie Basin, Ohio, for our Nutrient Stewardship Certification Program. And it gives a good reminder of how far this voluntary industry-led program has come with the support and funding from public and private stakeholders. The program's first advisory committee meeting took place after Chris Henney of OABA and Carrie Volmer-Sanders with the Nature Conservancy wrangled a broad group of prospect stakeholders in early 2012 to build this initiative with what we know as of the program today. And then the program was launched in March of 2014, and the first certification was earned in October of 2014. Like many other ag initiatives, we've had various challenges through the existence of the program. As the program just entered its eighth year about a month ago, it's important to note the support of both public and private partners and the funding that those partners have given to help lead to the successes of the program today. The pandemic this past year posed many challenges with the on-site audits through the program, and we've adapted with the option of remote audit procedures to complete annual audit requirements. Even with the current environment, 10 new participants have earned certification within the past 15 months. So that's great progress in our eyes. This can be attributed to the outreach work and virtual capabilities made possible through GLRI funding with tailored outreach visits or consultations, whether this be in person or remote, by Mark Fritz, who's our 4R outreach coordinator. And then we've also, over the past few years, have been able to create a lot of educational videos, materials, marketing signage for our voluntary participants who have earned certification, and also some learning modules that help with internal and external education. These modules are key for our certified nutrient service providers, as one of the pillars of the program is for our education. So this is, again, internal for staff and external for their grower customers. Today, we have 60 participants who have earned certification, and we're approaching 6,000 farmers that they serve, and 3 million acres serviced by these certified retailers and crop consultants. And as you can see, 1.6 million acres are located in the Western Lake Erie Basin. Program stakeholders are continually searching for value adds for this program and the voluntary participants within the program. As Terry Mesher discussed a few minutes ago, just the importance of recognizing or incentivizing the investments of new practices and the implementation of these new practices. So in 2020, the Ohio Department of Agriculture and Ohio Agribusiness Association recognized the value and the rigor of the certification program by finalizing a partnership for the H2 Ohio program, where 4R certified participants could submit nutrient management plans on behalf of their H2 Ohio eligible grower customers. And then these plans would be streamlined from a review process standpoint. So therefore, the initial building block of many H2 Ohio program practices would be met by these growers working with their certified retailers and crop consultants within the 4R certification program. So given the current environment, the program has been able to hold remote seminars for the 4R program participants or potential program participants to learn more about this partnership and the opportunity that this has provided to them. And then going back to last fall with the update made available to the public for the Tri-State Fertilizer recommendations, the program was able to host a few webinars for participants, certified participants, to connect directly with Dr. Steve Coleman, ask a variety of questions around the research and results of the update. And then this has led to opportunities for research project initiatives through partnerships between university and 4R certified participants, their grower customers, to help draw conclusions around 4R practices, specifically nutrient recommendation and application rates with potassium. The program's nearing completion of creating program management system as well, and this has come available to us through industry, private funds. This system will house audit processes and provide a platform to gain a better understanding of aggregate practices by participants and then their grower customers. And this will help derive correlations between the 4R practices and water quality in the program's participating geographies. So when I say participating geographies, the program started in the Western Lake Erie Basin, expanded to the full state of Ohio in 2017, and it's now expanded greatly with expansion into Canada in 2017, the provinces of Ontario and Prince Edward Island. Indiana and New York currently have certified participants. Florida and Minnesota have conducted pilot audits, and Missouri is working through its pilot processes as well. So this global program umbrella that we have now has 15 core requirements that each state or geography must incorporate within geography specific details. So the really neat thing here is that this started right here in our backyard with many of the stakeholders, many on the call today, and then various other ones too. With Indiana launching its own state program in late 2020, the WLEB Ohio program has been transitioning Indiana-based participants who have earned certification fully into the Indiana state program. So with the greater awareness of the program, with the expansion of the program in recent years, we hope to have this program available, say at a state level, for each state with acreage in the Western Lake Erie Basin here in the very near future. So lastly, a challenge for the WLEB Ohio program is increasing participation year after year. And I encourage you to visit the 4rcertified.org website to learn more about the program, follow our progress. I also encourage you to reach out to your ag retailers, your crop consultants, those contacts that you have, and encourage them to participate or at least learn more in this voluntary program. And then we also ask for the growers that you know to encourage their trusted advisors to participate in the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Certification Program, and continue to tell agriculture and agribusiness's story here in the WLEB. As Director Mullenix mentioned, others have mentioned this morning, we need to broadly communicate all these efforts that are going on here in our state in the Western Lake Erie Basin. So just quickly, I'm going to navigate out to the 4rcertified.org website. So that's the website that is housed for this program for all geographies, and I've got Ohio up here. This is just the homepage here. If you're interested in contacting me and learning more about the program, my contact information is down here, and I'll also throw it in the chat too. So welcome any questions at this point.
Great, thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to reserve all the questions until after the partner presentations, just to make sure that we get through all of those presentations. Though folks are welcome to start queuing up questions in the chat box. If you want to stop sharing, I think our next partner update is on all of the SEEP work being done. And Lisa Duranchek from NRCS. I think I saw you earlier, but hopefully you have rejoined the conversation.
Hi, hello, Joy. Yeah, I'm on. Just searching for my file. Sorry. Okay, go ahead and let me know if you can see that.
We sure can. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, well, I will do my best to get through a lot of updates in a quick amount of time, and then be happy to take questions later. So thanks for the invitation, first of all, to share with your group a little bit about what we're doing in the Conservation Effects Assessment Project. Specifically today, I'm going to talk about our watershed assessment studies. These studies are part of a national network, so I just want to briefly mention that, because in this network, you know, the watershed locations and scientists learn from each other across sites. We also do a lot of projects across sites. So there's a lot of opportunity through this network approach to bring the latest science and approaches that we're learning from anywhere in our network of 24 now active projects across the country and over 50 total since we started in 2003 to bring those lessons learned to Ohio. So we're happy to be having this opportunity. A couple just notes for some recent publications we have out for those of you that like to read. We did conduct a study last year and had a special section of the Journal of Soil and Water Conservation evaluating our soil vulnerability index. This is an index that NRCS uses to help identify areas in the landscape that are vulnerable to either leaching or runoff. That's available online, and in addition, in May of last year, we had a whole special issue that provided a synthesis paper summarizing our findings from our SEEP watersheds work in watersheds across different scales. So, you know, bottom line is over half of our watershed studies nationally have documented improvements in water quality benefits at the subwatershed or watershed scale that they can attribute to conservation in at least one constituent that's been monitored. So, you know, we can show progress, and that's really what these watershed assessment studies are about. And I invite you to read the paper by Moriasi et al. In that special issue to learn more. We do have some active projects, several active projects in the Western Lake Erie Basin. We've got a lot going on that map there, but our active projects are the St. Joseph River in Indiana, also the Blanchard River watershed study in Ohio, which is a more recent one for us, added in 2018. And then as well, of course, our Edge of Field network operated by ARS throughout the Western Lake Erie Basin that I imagine most of you are familiar with. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the newer specific projects that we have. We did have some assessments in the basin previously that have ended, so there's still useful information that can be drawn from some of those. And then we did have some ongoing assessments that are outside of the basin, but just adjacent to the basin, so lots of lessons learned there. So one of our additional practices beyond our watershed assessment studies in the Blanchard and in the St. Joe is part of our Edge of Field network, and we're looking specifically in this long-term project to evaluate stacked conservation practices as well as innovative conservation practices. This is led by Dr. Kevin King at ARS, and we've got about 4 or 5 years of funding into this project now. Last year, we provided additional funding to have it continue at least through 2024. So they're looking to, you know, understand when we stack conservation treatments within a field, at the edge of the field, or in a stream, how well can we do with reducing phosphorus, nitrate, sediment, and, you know, how well are these innovative practices? Someone asked earlier about phosphorus removal structures, for example. So part of what we're working to understand as well in the basin are legacy sources. These sources of phosphorus and sediment really do matter in terms of trying to reduce loads in small watersheds as well as in the basin. And we know that legacy sources of phosphorus in particular can serve as chronic sources for decades. They also mask the effects of our present day conservation efforts. So in our work in the SEEP project to understand and document effects of conservation, we really need to understand these better. And this is an area that, you know, we're starting to do some work in. And Mark Williams' project was mentioned earlier. So this was another grant that we funded last year. for over $750,000 for a 4-year assessment. They're going to be looking at legacy sources, not only in fields, but also using our edge of field data as well as some in-stream work. So this particular project does cut across scales. You know, it'll look at that soil column and what's going on within a field, but it'll also look at the edge of the field. And we have 56 fields that we're being monitored right now throughout the Western Lake Erie Basin in both Ohio and Indiana that will utilize data from in this analysis. And we're working with Ohio State University to do some in-stream work to look at residence time and other questions. Someone also asked about lag time earlier, so I did throw in this slide just to have the opportunity to mention that USDA has initiated back in 2017 a national assessment of watershed lag time. We call it the Watershed Lag Time Project. We're collaborating with USGS to add in some additional sample locations, but this is a study that we'll be carrying out within the Western Lake Erie Basin at our SEEP sites as well to actually quantify the lag time in these small watersheds where we're working to help us better interpret our results about conservation practice effects. And just to kind of wrap up, I think that Sandra mentioned earlier a paper by Mark Williams. This is just a little bit of data from this showing, again, what she alluded to was the increasing blue or increasing amounts of rainfall over 4 decades in the Western Lake Erie Basin, which you all have heard about many times, and really how that translates into an increase in discharge or increasing blue on this scale in the basin over 4 decades as well. So what we also know is that these heavy rainfalls are up in the spring and summer significantly, up to 45%, and that's resulted in increased discharge as well. And if you're interested in learning more about this, I would invite you to participate in the Great Lakes Regional Sediment Management Workshop. Later this month, we have 2 sessions that are going to feature talks on 4 different talks on SEEP studies, 2 in the habitat session, as well 2 in the ag non-point source session. So Google that workshop if you haven't registered for it yet. See the agendas and see if you're interested in that. Registration's free. And I will, for time, stop there. Thanks, Joy.
All right, thank you. So our next presentation is on OACI, and Chris, hopefully the screen is up.
It is. Thanks, Joy. Okay, hey, so hopefully everybody here, or most everybody, is familiar with our organization, the OACI, the Ohio Agricultural Conservation Initiative, which is actually a program from the Ohio Agricultural Conservation Council. If you can flip, Joy, that council is broad-based. It's made up of a lot of entities, ag, commodity, environmental, non-governmental, and educational partners. Joy, can you flip? Because I can't. Okay, great. You can go. Yep. And so we actually have 2 arms of this organization. We have a certification arm and an assessment arm. So go on to the next, Joy, the assessment page. The assessment page, we're seeking to document or take a snapshot of conservation in a 8-digit HUC in 1 year. This year, for our initial assessment, we did the Lower Maumee watershed. We worked with technicians from about 7 different SWCDs to randomly space points across the watershed to collect data. We have collected 400 of those data points right now. We're still working on some to make sure our spatial distribution is adequate for some statistical validity. We're doing that randomly. So we are picking farms that are in programs, out of programs. And what we hope to do is actually pick up what conservation looks like in a watershed 1 year. And we hope that we can thereby see if the models that all our people are modeling verify what our on the ground truth is telling us. Sometimes we get, and I know I see some modeling and I say, hey, it doesn't look what I'm visually seeing in my watershed. We're trying to tie those two things together. We're doing this year. We're going to aggregate the data. We will provide it to partners, but only in an aggregate form on a HEC 12 level. We're going to move on next year and hopefully do 2 more, or if our resources increase, we may do more, but our plans are for doing 2 more assessments every year into the future. If you could move on, Joy. So these are some of the practices and questions we're asking in the assessment model. It's all on conservation activities on a parcel just this 1 year. So we've been pretty pleased that our participation level from farmers on just a blind, we're calling them out of the dark, asking them, they are by and large helping us out. Very few farmers are not cooperating with our soil and water technicians. If you could go on. The other arm of ours is the certification. That's more of a whole field or a whole entity, whole operation. So farmers are going to go into our app and tell us what they're doing on their whole operation. That is not only in the Western Lake Erie Basin, but open to all of Ohio. We are going to have some linkage between that and H2 Ohio, some stronger linkage next year starting in July. We're pretty encouraged by that. It's going to allow us to see what's going on out on the watershed. One thing I'll tell you about this, that when you start looking at the numbers down the line, our OACI numbers and our H2 Ohio numbers in the watershed may not directly co-align. That's because our certification model is looking at a whole operation, where H2 Ohio can look at parts of an operation. And a lot of times, perhaps an operation will have a father and 2 sons. They will have 3 H2 Ohio contracts, but they will be entered as one entity under our OACI certification platform. So we think some people will look at the numbers and say they don't really look co-aligned, but that would be the difference in the two. So that's about all I have, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Chris. We are going to go to our last presentation. Greg, are you also on the line and able to share? There we go.
I am online.
Perfect.
Can you see the presentation in presentation mode?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit with you today about some of the things that we're doing from an educational outreach standpoint to help with practice discovery and implementation in relationship to water quality. These really are ways of making impacts in relationship to trying to help farmers understand better how to do practices, how to make them work within their system. And I think that's very important that I'll hit upon a couple times, is that we do have a farming system out there that we're working with, and making changes has other impacts within that system. Education is obviously an important component to plant the seeds to make change in the future. These are some of the different ways that we engage farmers and ag industry in relationship to that type of activity. And one of the big things that we've been involved with initially going back to 2014 was the implementation of the fertilizer applicator certification training program here in the state of Ohio. That revolves around an initial 3-hour training program Then follow up every 3 years with 1 hour of CEU credits. And right now, as of 1st of April here, we're around 16,500 participants in that program, which we jointly work with Ohio Department of Agriculture on. And we, kind of this idea of planting seeds, this was some survey work that we did initially with the initial certification training, where we were able to identify that farmers were understanding the level of P loss having a significance in relationship to affecting water resources downstream. And that was a part of really that initial 3-hour training. When they came back through the first time for recertification, we tried to follow up on what did they do from the 3-hour training, how did they adopt that? And one thing that we were able to identify here is that the fertilizer certification program training led to them to adjust their phosphorus recommendations not to exceed the tri-state fertilizer recommendations. And so they were making changes on their farm due to the education that they had received through these fertilizer certification programs. So training starts to build that understanding of ag nutrients and water quality linkage, and is the foundation for making future nutrient management changes on their operation. Just think there's a nugget there that we need to think about in relationship to getting education and using education to advance practices and adoption. One resource that we've provided and worked on is the Ag BMP website, which starts to highlight the resource concerns of erosion, nutrient management, and water management. And what we tried to provide the user of that is the where, when, why, and how in relationship to those practices. So they have a good understanding of how it would work on their operation, what situations it works best in, some of the economics, and some of the pros and cons to have a realistic picture of what that adoption looks like on their farm. Cover crops is a very good practice, but it does change management, and we need to understand what those management changes are, such as we need to maybe be monitoring corn after that cover crop for insect infestations, as one example. Water Quality Associates, we have a group that started with us last year in March, so their activities were and have been fairly limited over this first year, but they've done a good job of getting out into the landscape, starting to work with production strategies, technologies, best management practices. And this is the group that will be the target in relationship to thinking about the 9-element plan discussion we were having earlier. And this is some of the outreach and education that they've been able to add to what county educators would have been doing in their local communities as well. So it just gives you a good idea of how they're working in the landscape, and that this new resource is available for us to work with others to look at education implementation. One important thing that the Water Quality Associates, as well as our county educators, work on is a lot of on-farm research, thinking about how to work that new practice into the farm operation. We start with a simple plot plan, then we get that treatment that was designed, implemented on the farm. What we are able to add to the farmer implemented type of on-farm research is going out and pulling some samples that help explain the results at the end, because that's not something that farmers typically do on a regular basis. Obviously, yield is important, and so we do work with analyzing the yield from that on-farm research. And then economics is also important. So talking about what the cost of implementation is, how maybe equipment changed and what that changes to the cost structure, and then how that affects the bottom line of the farming operation. A lot of the on-farm research that we do is related to 4Rs, and we do have a publication that does highlight a lot of that research on an annual basis, and you see it here. So we do get some individual information out about individual plots that are going on throughout the state of Ohio. And sometimes that result of that work is actually taking that and putting it into recommendations that result in something like the Tri-State Fertilizer recommendations, which were updated in 2020. That program gives us a good basis as far as cornerstone of fertilizer management for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, managing soil pH, and really is a cornerstone piece for us in thinking about working with farmers on a nutrient management discussion. In-crop application of manure is one practice that I just want to reiterate. I think many of you are familiar with the work that Glenn Arnold's been doing, but the idea of how that moves from, just the simple practice earlier of talking about of making sure we get manure off the surface and incorporate it into the soil. This practice takes it to the next level where we're actually able to take advantage of that nitrogen in crop production and replace commercial fertilizer that would be purchased on the farm. And just hit a final topic here that we have as far as on-farm research, looking at soil health. We had a project last year that will continue this year that's looking at the impacts of cover crop and length of those cover crops being in place and no-till, and being able to identify what the influence is on some of our soil health factors such as organic matter, POX, which is active organic matter, and aggregate stability. And we see that by adding cover crops and having cover crops in the system, it really does add to and shows a positive correlation to these soil health factors that we're looking at. And really, when we talk about soil health, that's what most farmers are trying to figure out, is how to evaluate it so that they can implement it better and know what practices are positively impacting soil health. I'm going to measure, since I'm running a little long here, I want to talk about really 3 projects where we're trying to tie practices of ag implementation on a landscape and look at the downstream effects of that. We have one project where we're working with ARS, who has a 2-stage ditch monitored, and we're going upstream from that 2-stage ditch and looking at the whole watershed and identifying on a field-by-field basis things like soil test levels and practice implementation. We have another project that's going on near Delphos, Ohio, that is looking at watershed